It's been this inaugural year that it's really been wild. It's been so full of beauty, and I'm incredibly grateful for each and every person who's been a part of it, every one of you. And I know we have some of our people also traveling because of the long weekend. But if you are newer to our community and you don't know our full story, I'll give you the abridged version. Basically, we used to be a part of a multi-site church, and at the time, we found out June of 2024 that we really kind of came down with two options. One was that we needed to basically close down as a part of that multi-site church because there were some big conversations around finances, and essentially a church that had 5 locations needed to shrink down both its staff and its footprint. Or the second option was for us to become independent. And I mean, obviously, we're still around. So, in my own prayer time, I really felt like God was moving us forward as an independent church. We also got blessings from the multi site church to go ahead and move in that direction. And so, we rallied together. That's the short version of it. And I mean, God showed up in so many different, incredible ways. Week after week, we were witnessing, even as a part of that bigger church, God doing some substantial healing among us and our people and also within our communities. We were witnessing that week in and week out. And as a church, we were also operating from a place of good financial health, finding ways for us to also press forward to pursue God's justice and God's goodness in our world. And so somehow, I mean, it's still kind of crazy to me, but somehow God helped us to move forward together. And we saw God transitioning this community in the span of just 7 weeks. Isn't that crazy? Let's thank God for God's faithfulness. I mean, really, it was through a lot of grit, unexpected provision, unlikely partnerships, and whatever little bits of faith that we were able to muster at the time that God showed up and helped us to move forward. And we got to grow over these past 12, 15 months, some very healthy roots as a church. And I know that it's only because so many of you said, yes to this community, yes to our mission and our vision, and yes to God moving us forward. I wanted to just share a few different highlights, and you're gonna see a slide on the screen that just highlights a few different ways. It doesn't capture everything that God has done, but at the very beginning of this year in January, you probably remember hearing about the wildfires out in LA and California, and we were able to mobilize this church to provide over 600 relief kits that were sent in immediate response to what was happening out there. On top of that, as we rolled into the fall semester this year, you helped us to collect 2,500 individual items, food items, so that we could try to put an end to food hunger here in Central Texas. We really are starting to see these new and existing partnerships grow with impact, and I'm so grateful for that. Beyond that, we also provide English as a second language for our English adult language learners. We do that every week here, Monday and Thursdays. If you're interested, just connect with me or with Kevin Vincent. If you don't know him, I'm happy to make the connection. And on top of that, we've been establishing our trustee and wisdom boards in our first year and really trying to grow healthy church systems, because I know some of your own stories, right? Some of you have shared. I came from a place of incredible pain and hurt because of how church was done, because of sometimes the way that I felt this way or that way in terms of how leadership progressed and tried to move forward, but it felt bait and switch or it felt deceptive. And so we've really tried to lead with a lot of clarity, a lot of accountability. I'm happy to share our wisdom board recently over the past few months put together a clear process for pastoral accountability. And so they're asking me to actually provide reports, and we're linking up on a pretty consistent level so that there is a lot of health that's grown from the ground up at the very beginning. So when we say yes, these are the things that God gets to do. God fills us up with God's Spirit and God's imagination, and that's what we've seen over the past year, and that's what we're also praying for more of as we launch into the fall semester. And your yes today and throughout the next several weeks and months and years to come really does help us to grow this church and also helps us to create ripple effects of hope and goodness into our world. Just imagine, it's not just for the here and now, but it's also for future as we see more of God's Spirit moving among us. So today I wanted to ask 2 questions as we consider what it looks like during this State of the Union to go after God's flourishing, God's vision for us together. The first question is just kind of looking back. How can you recall God's faithfulness in your own life? How's he shown up? Maybe in the past week, maybe in the past 2-3 years. And the second question is, how might God be inviting you to say yes to the new thing that God is doing in your life and also within our community? Without a doubt, I do believe God's Spirit is moving and calling us to be a part of something bigger than just ourselves, to bring about the change that we often dream of in our world, to fight against the isolation that we know too much of, the hypocrisy that we see, the divisions within our world. I dream of the kind of church that our kids are going to be proud of, the kind of church that when generations look back and also look forward in future, that they really do see the fingerprints of God's hope and God's justice. So in our second year as a church, we're inviting God to breathe fresh vision and also renewed commitments to what God's doing. We're also doubling down on what God has called us to be, which is a community of flourishing for all people. So I just wonder, what does that mean to you? And we've talked about this from time to time, this idea, this vision of flourishing for everyone. For one thing, I think it means that we care for all people and for so many different causes in our world. To seek the peace of our city, we see that within Scripture, right? Jeremiah talks about seeking the shalom of a place that may not even be your own home, the peace of our world. And so I want to take a moment to acknowledge a reality that you and I, as a part of this church, we are actually tethered to something so much bigger than just us here in this space right now. We are tethered to things that come with incredible hope, but there's also so much suffering, and there's also so much that we might lament. So many pains around us, the ongoing conflicts and loss around our world, the dehumanization of others, or even when I think about this past week, the horrific shooting that happened in Minneapolis at a church called Annunciation Church. The lives that were so inhumanely snuffed out when someone just decided to pull a trigger. What happened this week was a chilling picture and reminder of everything that stands against flourishing. The chaos, the political gridlock, the empty words and prayers, the failure, ultimately, of our shared humanity. And so we lament, just like we learned over the past month, we lament these things, these realities. We cry out for God to show up and to move among us. And I think for us as people of faith, as people who are saying, yes, Jesus, we want to follow you, I think it points us back to some of these harder parts of the scriptures, like James 2:16 and 17. In it we read, if one of you says to them, basically someone who is suffering, go in peace, keep warm, be well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. And so today, as we look at what we just named, I don't want to just merely offer thoughts and prayers, but instead to truly seek the flourishing of all people. Because to do that requires so much more than just words and prayers. God's vision of flourishing compels us into action. Our prayers, you see, are actually meant to move us, our hands and our feet, to do something about the brokenness in our world, not as saviors, but as people who are partnering with God's Spirit. God's vision calls us, yes, to pray, but not just to stop there, because it also encourages us to say things like, hey, mobilize some collective action around the brokenness that you see. Call your representatives. Because gun violence and chaos, like we saw this past week, it's not a partisan issue. It is a human issue. And as humans who bear a collective responsibility together, God calls us to pursue good, to confront that which does take away life. So I don't want to settle. Instead, may we pray that God would make us the ones who are on the front lines, to bring about a sensible change that is needed. And whether that's on the phones, at the voting booths, or on the streets, let's keep our ear to the ground and discover, God, how are you calling me to live out a faith that does come with action and not a faith that is just dead. Putting faith and action together, I get it. It's a little bit challenging, especially when we talk about it in this way where it's like, wow, I'm really butting up against the reality of life, but that is what true faith needs to look like. Because remember, the call of Jesus has always been meant to challenge us in some very significant ways. We're not just called to settle into a comfortable life, a comfortable faith. And that means before Jesus, as we worship this one who does proclaim life and freedom, everything is up for grabs. My opinions, my personal preferences, your political affiliations, all of our allegiances, whether it's to someone or to something, everything is laid before Jesus. And we ask God, what do you want to make of these things? How can I follow you? Because these things, they're not kings and queens. You are the one sovereign in my life. Are you willing to allow God and to trust God to move you in that way? Pope Francis, who recently passed away, once shared what I think really beautifully captures this vision of flourishing. He wrote this: if we are to come out of crisis better, we have to recover the knowledge that as people, we have a shared destination. What ties us to each other is what we commonly call solidarity. Solidarity is more than just acts of generosity, important as they are. It is the call to embrace the reality that we are bound by bonds of reciprocity. In other words, I just can't cancel a person who looks different, sounds different, believes a little bit different than me. I'm bonded to another person, and so are you. He writes, on this solid foundation, we can build a better, different, and human future. So what would it look like for us to actually begin to recover that sense of solidarity that Pope Francis writes about? What does it look like for us to belong to one another fully? I think that's the kind of question that has truly animated this church and our vision altogether. It's developed what I believe is a beautiful and rare expression of God's heaven come down here on earth. It doesn't settle for uniformity. It believes so deeply in a unity that exists across our diversity. And it's willing to engage one another for the sake of our common humanity. You know, there's a scripture that I shared, I think about a year ago, and it's a bit obscure. It's kind of tucked away in the Old Testament, and it's this prophet who's speaking to the people of God. It's the same scripture that I want to call us back towards because I do believe it captures some of what God is doing among us. In Zechariah 4:10, the prophet writes, do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin, to see the plumb line in Zerubbabel's hand, which is basically a way to measure things so that you build it correctly with good foundations. The overall message of this verse is pretty clear, that God does not despise the small things or the small beginnings, but instead God steps into it. God, in fact, rejoices and glories in new beginnings, in small beginnings. And that was true for sure back in the scriptures when Zechariah first wrote this. But what about us here today? Does this same promise hold true for you and for me? I think what God's trying to say is, whether you are a sixth grader who's just starting middle school today, or you're turning the corner into the fall semester, you're new to Austin, you're just settling in. Maybe you've been looking for a church home for a little while. To fully appreciate the scripture's meaning for us here today and to know how it applies to you and me, we have to go back, we have to trace back to some of the context. When the prophet Zechariah shared this verse, he was writing to a lost and wandering people. They were longtime exiles for generations, a conquered people that were not living in their own homeland. And at once, something miraculous happened. They were able to secure passage, safe passage back to their homeland, back to Jerusalem, and to the temple that had long been destroyed. It's the symbol of their faith, their identity, their collective well-being. Home, really, is what it was. And many of them, again, didn't even know Jerusalem, didn't grow up there, didn't know its streets. And they had this one primary goal: to rebuild the temple, to reestablish their life and their identity. And it's something that I think so many of us can actually latch onto, because we ask the same kind of questions no matter what part of history we exist on. Who am I? What kind of purpose do I have? Why am I here? So when opportunity knocked for them, a way for them to reclaim answers to those identity questions, to find a homeland, all of a sudden there was this hope, this excitement that existed among them. And so they showed up on the journey. They went back. But then things like apathy and fear, lies about who they are, what they could or couldn't accomplish, started to seep in. And eventually, what we find, according to the testimony of Scripture, is that all of the work for the temple rebuilding just completely ceases. For years and years, it just lies there, kind of half complete. And I just wonder, for you, like, have you ever seen someone do that? Like, they start a project in their life, there's all this excitement, all of these resources that they pour into it, and then all of a sudden it just stops for whatever reason. Something knocks them down, life happens, and they're just completely stalled. I think it's pretty depressing. I mean, I've seen construction projects happen sometimes around the city where they build things up and maybe they just run out of money. And I'm like, how could you not calculate this? And then it just kind of becomes this laughingstock among the community as you drive by, like, oh, like, look at this thing that nobody thought, what are all the steps that we need to take to complete this? I think some of us actually know that story all too well, because it's not them, it's actually my story. It's your story. We look at our lives and we know, yes, we started with so much hope, but somehow it just all dissipated. Life really did knock us down. Against this backdrop, God raises up Zechariah in front of the people. Someone who rallies and hears from God directly and inspires the people to complete this project and to rediscover their purpose. And one of the ways Zechariah does this is to basically call the people back to what God was doing, to remember that God isn't concerned about all of the nonsense that they were coming up against. In fact, we know that the Samaritans actually came against them. These were some of the external things that were happening. And sometimes they would just completely ridicule them. They would even try to bribe these people to stop the project altogether. For whatever reason, they didn't want to see the people of God thriving again. But there were these internal things that they also had to work through, the lies within. Zechariah shows up and reminds the people, can you recall how God has shown up in the past? Yes, your story is one of exile. There have been some incredible pains and sufferings that you have gone through. But can you see that God has still been there with you in the trenches? And it's the reason why we asked that first question today. How can you recall and remember God's goodness in your life, God's faithfulness in your life? Zechariah's words are meant to reinvigorate our hope and our faith. Again, he says, do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. Zechariah acknowledges that the small beginnings are hard. They're small, they're tough. Nobody actually likes that, especially if you've been in a place of suffering and exile, especially if you haven't seen a lot of repair. It's hard to get that initial momentum. It's even harder, I think, sometimes to sustain it, isn't it? But Zechariah says, don't despise that starting place, because God is there and he's rejoicing over the work that is beginning. So fight against the apathy, fight against the shame. Learn what it looks like to be a beacon that God has called you to be. And this all lines up actually to how we see God showing up through Old Testament into New Testament. God seems to show up all the time in the small beginnings with people who have been overlooked and sometimes even overrun. We see that in King David, the smallest among his brothers, the one who was sitting on the sidelines when everybody else was called out to war. But God saw something in David's heart, and God saw his character as something worth developing. And ultimately, God chose David to become king. We see it also in the way that Jesus goes about selecting his disciples. And I'm not just talking about the 12, although the 12, if you just look at them, they're not well-to-do. They're not the spiritual elite. They're not anybody who has the pedigree or the resume, and yet God calls them forward and says, will you come and follow me? But beyond that, and the fact that these guys were tax collectors and doubters and people who didn't carry much respect, Jesus also called the least of these to himself. He called the little children. When people said, don't let them come to you, Jesus said, let the little children come. My heart is full for them. When a world of patriarchy said, hey, don't call women into anything, they're just meant to do this and that in the home, Jesus completely flipped the script and had women as a part of his original followers. And he reveals God's heart for all of us, that no matter who we are, no matter what our foundations might be, not only are you welcome, but I see incredible promise and hope and goodness that you can bring. I wonder if you just took the moment right now to trace back some of your own story, what kind of small beginnings come up in memory? Not talking about here and now, but like maybe a little bit further in your own distant history. Maybe it was a simple choice to say, you know what, I'm gonna start working out, and you showed up at the gym, and that started making a difference in your overall well-being and health. Maybe it was a choice to say hello to someone that you didn't know, and all of a sudden, they became one of your best friends now, and you go on vacations all together. But it was that awkward, like, should I say hi? Maybe it was a choice to just try something new. You discovered a lifelong hobby, a new career path, something that you find so significant today. Remember that this same God who was faithful to you in the past to bring about those opportunities is still doing the same thing today. Can you trust in that and hope in that? Because whatever small beginnings you may have had, whatever small beginnings you might have right now, God doesn't stand apart from them. He glories in them. And today I've invited a couple of our friends to actually share some of their stories, some of their own small beginnings. First story is actually one of my friends, Aljanai, and I'm gonna invite him to come on up right now. A couple of our friends are actually gonna set up a couple of seats as well for me and Aljanai. And if you don't know Al, he has been such a great part of our community. I consider just all the different ways that you've already served our kids over at the Village Ministry, and it's been awesome having you. Go ahead and grab a seat. We first got connected to you through your grandma, Charlene. So some of you may remember Charlene Baskerville. She sadly passed away this past year. And I do remember Charlene being such an incredible prayer warrior, someone who always led with hope and joy. And I remember she would bring you and others, right? Like, secretly, I kind of thought, wow, she's dragging a whole crew with her. And I have no idea what you thought, how you experienced all of that. But what I do know is because of your grandma, Charlene, you somehow found home with us, you know? And I just wanted to ask, like, can you share why you decided to make Union your church home? What about our vision kind of connected to your heart?
Well, first, I want to say thank you for having me up here. I decided to make Union Church my home because of three reasons. One, Union showed me that they truly strive to be a family inside and outside the church. This is the first time that I haven't felt like an outsider or a stranger inside of a church. I really appreciate this church because they rallied around me and my family while my grandmother was going through her transition. I especially want to shout out Mr. Mike and Mrs. Vicky for the love that they showed me and my grandmother. And the second reason is because of a sermon by Blanca. Her sermon about her journey through faith resonated with me and the trials and struggles that I've had in my life. She was even open about her questions, doubts, and mistakes. This was the first time I ever heard a high member inside of a church speak on that, being so raw and honest. I've had my moments in which I've questioned my faith, and she made me realize that it's okay to question things. That having questions and doubts at times doesn't make you a non-believer. Finally, I believe that union has not only strengthened my faith, but also has made me a better person. One of my biggest goals when moving here was to become the type of man that I could be proud of. The sermons by you and other members of the church have challenged me in the way that I think, the way that I interact with others. All of these have renewed my faith in the church and why I chose Union as my home.
That's awesome. Let's thank Al real quick. We love having you here, man.
I love being here.
I had one more question. As you think about your own journey, really becoming more a part of this congregation, like, why do you think it's important for churches like ours to make space for the hard questions and, to be a space for people to come as they show up, right? Like, without all of the, like, hey, you need to fit inside of this box and this and that.
I think it's important to have churches like ours that address things like inclusion and make spaces for hard questions, because life is bigger than just us. The hard questions, the Bible tells us that God loves all his children, and that is one of the biggest messages that we hear. Then I believe it is a church's duty to create a space that welcomes all of God's children, a space where it's okay for us to be different. I believe that having a church that is okay with tackling hard questions is imperative to create a space in which we can begin to understand one another. With these hard questions, we can learn to accept one another regardless of whether we agree with them. The Bible shows us many examples in which people always find ways to divide or separate from one another. However, through Jesus' teachings, we learned that we need to accept everyone, for we are all God's children and equals in his eyes. Therefore, we need to build more environments that bring us together rather than continue to break us apart.
That's good. That's deep. We need to get you teaching one of these days, man. It was good. Hey, let's thank Aljanai one more time. Appreciate you, man. All right, so we have one more story that I alluded to. This second one is actually going to be on the big screen, and it is a video that our friends Mike and Vicky Weller, who Aljanai was just speaking of, they are just going to share a little bit of their story. And, as we kind of transition from Aljanai to Mike and Vicky Weller, I'm just reminded that we really are building something different here. We're not a country club for all the like-minded or somehow the spiritual elite, right? If there is even such a thing. We're here for people. We're here for people. We're a hospital, yes, for the broken, but we're also a haven for those who are hurting, those who have questions, a place that creates safety and belonging for one another, because, friends, that's exactly what Jesus did. And so we want to be like Jesus. Mike and Vicky, as they share, apparently, I didn't know this, they are now big TV stars. Some of you know this because you're friends with them on social media, but they recently were interviewed for their Medicaid experience and got on the news, and it was a whole big deal. We didn't know this at the time, so apparently I might need to up their fee or something. But check out this video, because I think it really does capture so much of what God is doing, and I hope it also reinvigorates or inspires your own faith journey.
Hi, I'm Vicki. I'm part of the prayer team and co-lead the camping group with this guy. And this is Mike.
Oh, my name is Mike Weller. I serve on the production team and the worship team at Union Church, and I love it.
Yeah. When Union was formed, we didn't really know what it would become. So it was a bit of a leap of faith, right, to start in a church that we didn't really even know who it was going to turn out to be. But we've experienced some challenges in the teachings, and that's been a good thing. It's been something we decided to welcome, and we've learned a lot through it.
Yeah, for me, the being at Union Church and being a part of it has really challenged me in opening up my heart and embracing this new church that has shown us where our hearts are not open.
Yeah, I think I've just really been challenged to study the scriptures in a very holistic way. Look at God's heart for inclusion, examine my own heart and my own thoughts and my own history, and reconsider. I still have questions, but what it's come down to is that I really want to be part of and serve in a church that is welcoming and loving, inclusive, and safe for anyone to learn about Jesus and follow him.
I want to embrace everybody. I want to follow and walk as Jesus had to the best of my ability. And I'm just not perfect, but I still strive towards that.
It has been a godsend for us to be part of such a loving community. We feel so loved, not just in hugs or greetings, but in real practical ways. And we just feel such a kinship and love for the people that we know.
Can you guys keep on playing that? I know it was a little bit black, but there's outtakes. We got to see the outtakes.
Hi, I'm Vicki.
One thing that I love about our community, whether it be the church, our bigger group communities, or our own camping group, is we just love food. We love to eat. It is, I have such a grand time doing that.
So,
especially the camping group, I emphasize the fact that this digital video these days.
we needed to be challenged in there. Hi, I'm Vicki.
Well, thank you for entertaining me. I took a long time editing that. Isn't it amazing to just see and hear what God is doing among us? And we're just getting started, friends. As you hopefully heard throughout both of these stories, God doesn't despise small beginnings. He revels in them. With small beginnings, God loves to show up with joy, with laughter, with glory. And our church has an unfolding story. You have an unfolding story. And that leads us to our second question. Where is God beginning a new thing in your life today? Where is God beginning a new thing in your life as it pertains to your own journey, or maybe as a part of this church? Because imagine what happens when we all say yes to following Jesus in all of these different areas of our lives. What if we truly started serving our neighbors who are in need, or those who we might consider our enemies and the outcasts of this world? What if we started building into each other's lives here as a church community? What if we invested in each other, not just on Sundays, but throughout the week in our groups? We learn to prioritize one another because we're not just interchangeable beings, but we are people made and created in the image of God. And we actually need each other for our birthdays, our celebrations, and the difficult times. Guess what? We don't have people walk alongside of those things unless we invest in each other, unless we say yes to one another. One of our youth mentors over at Rise Together recently did just that, right? Decided to show up and to prioritize. Some background, he's a realtor, and so he's often working on the weekends. And Saturdays, Sundays, those are very busy times for him. But he decided to protect Sunday, just this past weekend, so that he could be available to serve our middle and high school students. Actually locking out his schedule so that he's not taking appointments at sometimes the busiest times of his weekend. And he did it because he wanted to trust God, yes, with his work, but he also trusted and believed in what God was doing with our next generation, our middle and high schoolers. You see, as we start this next year, our theme, we've already shared this with you guys. It's not just the theme for our upcoming church retreat, but it's the theme for the entire year, to build foundations. So let's build our foundation. Let's build our faith together. And there are 3 opportunities I just wanted to highlight as we close out our time together. The first one is just to connect. Consider connecting and growing together in a community, in a group. Kristen did a great job of just sharing about different options. So check that out on our website whenever you get the chance, unionaustin.com, and just sign up maybe for 1 or 2. You can check them out. Signing up doesn't mean you're tethered to the community forever, but find the one that fits your schedule and also is a good fit for you. Secondly, serve. You are the backbone of the church and our community. You see, without you, none of this happens, not just on Sundays, but also what we're doing all across our city. So big shout out to those of you who do volunteer, maybe every other week or so. Shout out to our A team and our guest experience and hospitality, our village kids, coordinators and teachers and volunteers. You guys are amazing and you live out God's heart for so many people. Thank you also to our boards and all of our leaders and our volunteers, whether it's the hospitality front or you're serving behind the scenes, making coffee. I know, Tom, you do that week in and week out for us. Let's give it up for Tom, just keeping us caffeinated. So important. Most of these options to serve are very family friendly. They're also just easy to step into. They're schedule friendly. 1 to 2 times a month. Consider what it would look like for you to partner together with us. Our biggest areas of needs right now are in our hospitality team and also with our village kids ministry. So if that's something that pricks your heart or that's something that you see, hey, that's a need and I just want to show up, we'd love to have you. And lastly, I want to also invite you around a heart of giving or generosity. As a young church, we all know this, new startups, it always requires investment of time and energy, but also our finances. So whether you give or you've never given before, we'd love to invite you to consider what partnership looks like in this next year. So if you currently give, again, thank you so much for being a part of what God is doing. It's been incredible. This first year, we've shared and we've celebrated how God has really grown us, not just as a community, but also in our own financial health. And if you're not giving yet, ask God, how might you be inviting me to trust you in a new way, to be a part of the local church and to move your mission and your vision forward? And at the mention of money, I'm just gonna have to say this up front. I'm not here to try to spiritually manipulate you into giving at all. Right? That's not the point of this. It's just naming the reality that for us to move forward and to continue to grow, we need your help and we need your investment. And I think God really does move in you and me and in all of us when we choose to say yes. We all struggle here, myself included, right? We live in a very Scrooge-like culture. We ourselves, at least I'll admit, I have Scrooge-like tendencies, right? There's this thing that some of us might call greed or just the mentality that, it's less than and less than and less than. And it keeps us sometimes from living out of a spirit of generosity. But when we choose God's pathway towards generosity, I think something inside of us begins to change and transform. We become more free, less attached to the things that we actually can't carry with us beyond our grave anyway. We learn to trust God more in the places that sometimes are often already outside of our control. We also get to learn to live out of freeness and generosity, lives of impact. And I'll be super transparent with you guys. This is what me and my family do, right? We tithe, we give 10% to the local church as well, right? And I'm not sharing that to boast, but I'm sharing that because I believe in leading with transparency, leading with integrity. And I want you to know, let's all put money where our mouths are, where our hearts are, because I think what God is doing here really does matter. The scriptures tell us in 2 Corinthians 9:6, remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. Whoever sows generously will reap generously. In other words, God will bring blessings way beyond just the finances. I'm not here to promise you a yacht in the next week. That's just not how God works. But God does say, hey, I'm gonna bless your spirit, I'm gonna bless your life in ways that might go beyond what you expect. So consider one of those three, or maybe all three of them. And there is a 1% challenge that we're also putting out there when it comes to generosity. This is just above and beyond. If you do feel like, hey, God's really blessed me over this past year, maybe you got a promotion, be a part of the 1% challenge, which is just saying, hey, I want to give 1% more to see our vision and our church move forward. We're continuing to move forward with our goal of completing our 6-month rainy day fund. We're about 2/3 of the way there, which is way ahead of schedule, beyond what our boards predicted. We still have a little bit more to go. So your giving, your generosity helps us to become a resilient community as we ride the waves of our economic uncertainty from time to time. But I want to say, whatever option or options you feel pressed towards today, whether it's connecting in a group and being in community, serving together and making a difference, or giving and living out of a spirit of generosity, let's go after a vision of flourishing together. As we close, I just want to circle back to those two questions, because I think this is the seed bed or the foundation through which God's Spirit can move in us. How have you seen God be faithful in your own life? What comes up? How can you worship God? How can you thank God for those things? And then how can you say yes to the new thing that God might be doing in your life and in our community? What is God saying to you today? I want to invite you to reflect on that, to pray and to just connect with God's heart. And as we respond to God in faith, let's build the foundation of what God is doing here, so that not just us, but others all around our communities can thrive and discover more of God's heart for hope and healing, goodness, justice, righteousness, forgiveness, even reconciliation. Will you join together with me as our band leads us in a song of response? And you can stand up if you feel led to, or you can sit and just continue to reflect. But we hope that this time is just a creative space where you can connect with yourself and also with God.